Welcome back to Orthodox Life with Bishop Nikolai. Today we're going to be talking to Father Dimitri in the life of a priest in a parish, in a home, and in the world. And it should be very interesting. It's very important in the Orthodox Church that parishioners get to know their priest. And I know that some of our people, hearing this, because I'm here, they're all the time, there's always those things about wondering what's going on. Nothing's going on, other than we have a priest now in the parish too, along with me. So it's important that our people know their priest. That's why they're called father. The priest's wife is a matushka, which means mother. It's kind of a common thing. This is the kind of relationship that we have. So we'll go on with the questions today for you, and you'll be able to edify everybody.
First question I have here for you, very simple. Where were you born, and what was your family life like growing up?
I was born in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I moved to Wisconsin when I was 2. My parents both were born in Pennsylvania, but they moved out to Wisconsin, where my father started a parish. He was a priest, became a priest before I was even born. So I grew up being Orthodox, grew up going to the services, serving with my father.
Were there any key moments, mentors, or values from your childhood that shaped your spiritual outlook that you have today?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say I had any particularly, key mentors. I, had confessed to many different priests over the years when I was young and growing up, and, I got a lot of good advice over the years, Mm-hmm.
So there had to have been a point in which you were first felt called to serve as a priest. And was that a time in your life early, or was that maybe a little bit later on?
Yeah, I don't remember the particular time, that I first had the thought of being a priest, but I would say generally it was in my high school years that I was seriously considering going in that direction, becoming a priest. I'd say it started more just with an inclination of, thinking maybe someday I'd like to be a priest, maybe just having, again, served so much as an altar boy with my father. I felt a very, a real closeness to, serving in the altar and church, just doing church things with the services. So that's where I started going in that direction.
You have 4 older brothers, right?
Yes. No, I have 2 older brothers, but I have 4 sisters, and I'm the second youngest.
Okay. Did any of those other brothers pursue the priesthood?
No, they didn't. None of, my oldest brother, he actually got into doing computer work early on, programming type work. My other brother, he did get into doing iconography, more of definitely an artist type. But no, neither of them, to my knowledge, ever considered that path.
Were they serving the altar with your dad too?
Yes, although I would say my the second oldest brother, he served more. I don't think my oldest brother served quite as much in the altar, because he was already a little bit older when my parents converted to Orthodoxy.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common in parishes where priests have sons. They try to get them to go to the altar.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference there from the point when they quit making them to where they still want to stay. And it sounds like that's your decision to stay, and the others decided at some point that they would leave. So that's kind of a turning point, I think, for direction,
sure,
at least to head somewhere toward that.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, so you said you first felt called to serve during high school. Was there maybe a key turning point or something that happened during those years that, brought you closer to the faith?
I finished my high school years at a school in Alaska, an Orthodox school, and at this school it was pretty there was a strong emphasis on church services and spiritual reading, and just generally being focused on the spiritual life. And I off and on during that time I was considering the possibility of going to seminary. Actually, I took a few classes at the seminary even during my high school years in Alaska, and but I didn't go full time there, and I went to after several years after high school, I got married and moved to Wisconsin to be near my family, and it was only after I got married that I took a more of a serious step towards becoming a priest.
What kind of influence do you think your wife had on that? Where did she grow up?
Mm-hmm. Well, she grew up in Colorado, but we met in Wisconsin, actually through the school that I was attending, and she was also very...
You met in Wisconsin?
No, we met through the school that was in Alaska. So, she definitely, she definitely helped going in that direction, because she, going to the same school, she was also enthusiastic about, learning the services and, again, just the pursuit of spiritual life, having a healthy spiritual life. So she was on board with that all along, from before we got married, and, talking about, kind of what our future could look like. And so she was on board once we started taking that more concrete step, of speaking to the bishop.
And she grew up in the church too.
Yeah, she converted in her teens, but yes, she was even from her early teens going to an Orthodox church with her family. So she had a very strong foundation also.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it wasn't until after you were married till you went to seminary and fully took the...
Yeah, so I didn't attend a seminary ever full time. Besides these classes at the seminary in Alaska, I took some online courses through one of the seminaries, and this is primarily because I had already gotten married, and I had my own business that I was running, doing woodworking, and so it was very difficult to think of a way to drop all of that. We were already in debt for the business, and just so we couldn't really think of how it would work for us to drop the business and then move to a seminary. But this was something we considered together, and it just never happened.
So then how did the prospect of getting ordained come about?
Well, so I went to the bishop. This was when we were living in Wisconsin. My wife and I went to the bishop at a clergy conference in our diocese, and conveyed to him that I would like to start taking courses online for seminary, because I didn't think it was practical to move to the seminary in person. And shortly after, the bishop, knowing me a little bit, and knowing that my father is a priest, knowing my father, he told me he would like to ordain me early, at least, starting as a deacon, to assist my father, because my father was getting older and could use help. And so I considered this with my wife. It was already in my heart. That was what I was seeking ultimately. So it wasn't really, I didn't have to make up my mind. It was what I desired. My wife was on board with it. So I accepted, and then the bishop, made a time to ordain me soon after. Mm-hmm.
And then you served with your father for how long?
I think this was, about 2 years, maybe even a little bit more than 2 years, about 1.5 years as a deacon, and then I was ordained to the priesthood, and continued serving with him until my wood shop burned down. Because during these years, I was, I still had my business, like I mentioned, and this was a very big part of our life there in Wisconsin, and and in attachment to the parish was my job doing this woodworking. The shop burned down, and we were looking at a couple different possibilities of things we could do, and there was my father's parish being very, very small, very tiny. It wasn't any possibility that it could support me. It wasn't a possibility to discontinue the business, and so I started to look for possibilities where I could maybe serve as a priest somewhere, and be supported partly while still trying to rebuild the business. But having lost so much of the business, I couldn't count on that for a while. So we looked at other possibilities and ended up moving out to Washington State, to a parish there we were there for about a year before moving to Jordanville, New York, and with the hope of being able to continue education at the seminary there. That didn't ultimately happen because of the business still being in the way, still having debt, and not really being able to free myself from this work. But
so you went back to Jordanville again to possibly take some more courses in that and to get your business revived.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any intention of going back on a parish at some point? You must have had that thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did have the desire to do that. I was really, my mind was going towards just wanting to get seminary under my belt, having only done the online courses and just, of course, touching on, like I said, the seminary in Alaska. But, I couldn't find something that was available. Both my wife and I were looking. We had a hard time finding something that we could fit in our heads.
I mean, the bishops weren't helping you find something?
No.
Really?
No, I don't
For
think.
real?
I don't think we were offered anything.
Strange.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was more of a default for me to decide on going to Jordanville. Default in the sense that because there wasn't an option that I felt was good to serve as a priest at, I knew that I wanted to learn more and get more educated. So that was why then we moved to Jordanville. And then we were there for 2 years, and the possibility came up of, we heard about the parish in Las Vegas. This was through Father Felipe, who had been serving there, and he told me about it, and I let it sit for a little while, considering it until, I think for a number of months, but it was just kind of working inside me, just considering the idea. Las Vegas as a place certainly didn't have any appeal to me, and, that's why I didn't jump on it, even though Father Felipe mentioned it as it could be a very good, a very good place to go. But I was really longing to do more priestly work. At Jordanville, there's a lot of priests besides the higher monks, the monk priests. Besides them, there's several instructors that are priests, so they don't have any real need for any priests there, of course. And so I didn't really have any responsibilities there as a priest.
Yeah.
So I was longing for that, and so I considered it. I would say, for, I don't know, maybe even a half a year, possibly, before, that I had actually already knew of the possibility. And then I went to Father Felipe, and I told him I was interested in exploring the possibility, and he gave me your number, and I called you up, and we started talking.
Mm-hmm. And then you came out for a visit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I came out, visited. This was just on my own, first
money?
time. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah,
It is Las Vegas.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah, I mostly spent the time in the airport because of, they had plenty of machines
security.
There.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, right. But eventually I got to actually talking to you after that. And,
yeah, I remember that conversation we had on the telephone when you were coming out, because you were going to be staying with me. And at one point you said, "Do you think we'll have some time to talk privately?"
Yeah.
And I kind of chuckled. I said, "You'll be living with me. You'll
Right.
have captive audience."
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of amusing to me, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, in my mind, I thought you would, you'd have all your things you'd be busy doing, and there might not be enough time for
like
quality time.
Like I'm not busy.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. I understand.
Yeah. So.
And he's old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So that trip was very good.
Well, that was positive because you came,
Mm-hmm.
but then you brought your family a few months later.
Yeah.
And I remember that moment at the trapeza when we were having lunch, and Matushka was sitting across from me, and I looked at her and I says, "You really didn't think it was like he told you, did you?"
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of chuckled. She said, "I didn't."
Yeah.
And I knew that would be the case
Mm-hmm.
because it's unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you don't expect this kind of parish. It's just very
Yeah.
vibrant. It's big, vibrant. It's very nice. Yeah.
Like I say, Rokor's best kept secret.
Mm-hmm.
So, Father Dimitri, what was your earliest experiences as a newly ordained priest? And, being a priest in Vegas now after being at so many parishes, is it any different than it was, now
Mm-hmm.
compared to the beginning?
Yes. After I was ordained, I was especially serving. I was serving often at a mission in Wisconsin. Besides serving with my father, half of the time I was actually driving 3 hours each way to a mission, and this mission was really just in the middle of nowhere. It was in the countryside, and so the people coming to that mission were just from the nearby city, but it was very small. We had probably typically 10 people come when I would come up and do services, but the bishop asked me to serve there, so I would do this approximately I would do this about every other week, actually. And it was very difficult. My wife was the only singer, and we already had two children already, at least. So she's holding a baby, and she's the only singer, and so it was very simple doing the services that way. It was a small church, but yeah, compared to especially now, it's just night and day. We have a lot of parishioners here.
I think as a side note, that one of the parishioners in that mission that you were serving
Mm-hmm.
Comes to Las Vegas to winter every year.
Right.
And
right.
to think that you'd make that connection here. I know,
Mm-hmm.
when she found out that you were here, she was so excited about that.
Right.
But to think that all the way across country, and they're wintering here, and here you meet again, and it was a nice thing.
Right. Yes.
In fact, she became the godmother for your latest child.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was a very nice, very good relationship. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you were with your dad as a priest too, and the mission was small, so you probably didn't have a lot of pastoral things that you had to do. And
Right.
same thing down when you're going. I served. I mentioned the last taping that I served Miles City, Montana every month. 150 miles away. So you're trying to fit everything all in that one visit when people have things that they want to talk about, or
Mm-hmm.
things, memorial services, or to plan for other things in the church. So it makes it a little, again, you're working a full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
to keep those things going is a little more difficult.
Yes.
And then you went to Washington where you were the assistant priest, right?
Yes, I was the assistant priest there, and then actually shortly after I got there was another priest that moved there and needed a place to serve and just to land. He had been doing some missionary work, and so this is why he was needing a place to land. So quickly there already, I was now the third priest at this parish that I moved to, and so I still wasn't feeling very fulfilled, in that position. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Were there any lessons or anything that stuck out at those many stops that you still kind of bring with you today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, maybe some that stand out the most would be just my time in Alaska at the school that I stayed at. The school was run by a very charismatic priest, and he ran a very tight ship with the school, and was really on top of of the students. And so, I received a lot of formation through that time, of especially discipline, and then also familiarity, just further familiarity with the services. But he was very, very heavy-handed, and so I would say he's probably the most influential in helping me to understand what is not helpful from a priest, and then and of course, I've had many good examples of priests besides, just your typical priests are, striving to help you get closer to God and just help you with your life in general.
I'd like to talk about something a little bit off of this, but you worked a job. Most of your priesthood, until coming here, that was your full-time work. In my experience over the years in watching clergy families, that you have probably two different kinds of priests. You have that priest who does his churchly things as a job, keeps office hours, sees people at certain times, does the services, comes and goes, and the family doesn't go anywhere. They're kind of away from that because he's going to work. And then you have the family who participates in the life of the church. Even though he's the priest, they're still participating in that life. And that's the families that I see that have the best success with their children. Because those children then continue going to church. They continue later on bringing their significant others to the church. And they stay involved in what's going on. And I see that that's the kind of family you have. And I think that that's, for me, that was very critical, because I'm not hiring somebody to be, some lackey in the parish. When people even ask me, they say, "Oh, is Father Dimitri going to be your successor?" They're already burying me. So that gets to be kind of silly sometime. What are we thinking about that? Let's think about what we have now, and to think about the joy in what we can do with more workers. And that's been a real positive thing. And I think that's a message to every priest family, that you have to participate in the life of the church. Because if you put the church aside, and I saw this so often, even, in the Serbian church, as I mentioned, I was there for 30 years, and I was involved in the Serbian church when it was split. We had the communist church that was under the Patriarchate, which we belonged to. And then you had the new church, the Free Serbian church that wasn't attached to anybody and no one recognized. And I remember going back east to some of those parishes where I went to school, where husbands and wives weren't even talking to each other because they were on different sides of the church. That's an awful thing to be. But we put ourselves on different sides of Christ. And it doesn't work unless you're with him, as a family in particular. But again, the church has to be first. And as we talked about that from the very beginning, for every priest, it doesn't matter, what your family situation is, the church is first, and you'll be blessed. And yeah, there'll be struggles, and I'm sure you've learned a lot of things from different priests. I know priests always want to talk, especially to young priests. I was there once. I can still remember some of those, to give you their ideas and what they think and how things should be and what you should do. You take those things in, and then you work it out to the best, and then it makes you a better priest.
Did you have any fears or hopes for your family with the responsibility that you would be taking on in the clergy?
Yeah, I'm not really the type to be, too worried ahead of time, about, what could go wrong, so I didn't have, fears of what could be, problems I could have as a priest, really I had hopes, of, contributing to building a beautiful Orthodox community, wherever that may be, and that's always been my desire as a priest, is to contribute to that.
I interviewed several priests before I took you, and most of them were recommended by Father Felipe, priest that he knew because he felt it was, I needed the help here. And the first question from two of those, the very first question was, what's the salary package? And my answer was, if that's your first question, we have nothing more to talk about. And no. I said, no, you don't understand. We have nothing more to talk about. You'll learn this for your next interview. But if that's your first question, there's no place for you here. And you never asked that question. I asked you, what would you like to see in your future? And your answer was to be a full-time priest. That's what you told me. You didn't say how much you wanted to be paid, or how what are the hours. Again, another quality. Right. But those are the kind of things that we learn. I remember a Greek priest friend of mine criticizing me. I think I mentioned this about not taking salaries for years, and he said you have to take it while you can get it. It won't always be there. Well, is that what we're in this for? If it is, we're in the wrong place. Right. Because you'll be blessed no matter what. That's just how it is.
Right.
So, Father Dimitri, how do you balance, your pastoral responsibilities, liturgical life, and then with, obviously, your growing family and your personal, hobbies and, personal time?
Well, I think that, just going to church itself, just going to the services when the whole family comes, we're doing it together. And, that's, not necessarily coming here at the same time, because I usually would, I need to be here early, of course. But, we're all here, and typically we're here longer than just up to the very end of the service. We hang around, talking with people, and the family is all together at that time. So even though it's a big time commitment coming to do services, since the family is participating, it doesn't really feel so much like, it doesn't feel like there's an imbalance that way.
How do you guard against, I guess, feeling burnt out and tired?
Yeah, how?
Yeah. Well, I talk a lot to my wife at home. I think, that's just, I guess maybe just, that's a personal way. Maybe some priests have, I'm sure have different ways of particularly, relieving stress. But for me, just being around my wife and just talking about anything, that's a real stress reliever for me. So I would say that's maybe the primary way that I don't feel burned out,
And you obviously have your business and you're woodworking still. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I still run this woodworking business, even though I've taken on a lot more responsibility as a priest at this parish, and it takes up a lot more of my time than it ever did before. But I still run the business, and it's just a little bit, it's just scaled back, or I'm working on scaling it back. I make icon boards for artists, for the iconographers to paint. And I used to do a lot more custom woodwork, but I'm more scaling back to just doing the icon boards. So that's still a big part of outside church life. That's a big part of my life. We also roast coffee. But this is just a very small side business. And this was something I started all the way back in Wisconsin as a means to subsidize our income, because at that time I didn't have enough woodworking business to make ends meet. So we added that on as a business, and we've just kept that going ever since.
Is there any reason you chose coffee? Is it?
It was, my wife and I just both love drinking coffee, and we were just trying to think of what's some kind of side business that, it just sounded appealing, and so I did some research into what it took to roast coffee, and we got some equipment and went off with it.
Well, don't forget about the goats.
Yeah, and the goats. Yeah, well, the goats, we had always wanted animals. In Wisconsin, we did have chickens, we had geese, but we never got to the point of anything bigger than that in Wisconsin. But once we moved out to Washington, we had some land, enough land to have goats on, and we got a few goats there, and we had a few goats in New York, and then now we've really expanded our goat herd here in Las Vegas. Interestingly enough, of all places to have a big goat herd.
And how many goats did you bring from Jordanville?
We brought 2, but...
And how many do you have now?
Now we have close to 30. Yeah.
But who drinks goat milk every day?
Well, Hosea definitely drinks goat milk every day. Oh, and Rocky, of course.
Yeah, Rocky.
Yeah. Yeah, we produce a lot of goat milk. That's that's a daily chore of mine. It takes about an hour every morning going out, and we're not milking 30 goats though. We have, like, right now we have 6 of them giving milk, and there's really at least a dozen young kids out there of all those numbers. They're not all matured goats. So,
and people in the parish buy your coffee and they buy your goat milk,
right?
And it's available also for other people too. It's on our website. I'm not sure about the goat milk, but I know the coffee is.
Yeah, the coffee is. And the goats and the getting the milk. That was never intended. We never had the intention of making it a business to make money from. It's just really it's just a lifestyle choice. We enjoy having that connection with livestock. My wife and I are really happy to have the children grow up with the experience of having the goats and learning to milk. They can, the oldest 3, which the youngest of those 3 is only 6, but even all 3 of them are able to milk by hand. They only help for so long. But they know how. That's the important thing. And so it's a really wonderful thing, as a wonderful aspect in our life.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would even comprehend that you'd have 30 goats in the middle of Las Vegas.
Right.
But all around us here, this is all rural estates where the church is, and we have horses in 3 of the sides.
Right.
And other people do have other animals, and you've got some chickens too, I know.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. It's just we happen to be in this section of the city that has the zoning allows for all this.
Yeah, it's very nice. It's like we're in the country actually out here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's a whole different atmosphere.
Yeah.
As I think Las Vegas is generally, what people look at Las Vegas and that term they use of Sin City, they talk about the downtown and the Strip, which is some place that those of us who live here, don't frequent.
Mm-hmm.
People come from other places who are looking to sin, and that's where they go. But we get accused of being a Sin City. But
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.